Ecological and psychological resiliency, so you want to be sure you're in the right place. And again, welcome to those of you. I know you have a lot of choices, and I appreciate you showing up for this morning. Let me just first thank my partner groups as well. Keith Wheeler from CEC, Communication and Education Commission, of which I'm a member. Rena Aguilar from the IUC and Gender Office, and Gonzalo Oviedo from IUC and Social Policy Unit. So those are my partners in this particular event. And of course, where I'm from, the Veritas Graduate Institute. So what I want to do today is explore a little bit about ecopsychology. We're only going to be able to tap into the topsoil because it's quite an extensive undertaking. But I hope that when you leave today, you have an idea of how it works and have some idea for how to apply it in your own areas or your own fields of vocation. The exploration might feel somewhat of a new language today, maybe a new way of seeing things, a new way of thinking about things, and even experiencing things differently. And that's a challenge, but it's also something that I hope that you embrace, because it is one of the intricate things about ecopsychology that it does open up and widen our perspectives. I'll use as an example today some ideas from the Gender and Social Policy Unit, so that by the end of the day we've worked through our own ecosystem understanding, and I'll use an example from those two groups to show us how to actually change behavior and practices that are based on a narrative, which, as you all know, is very difficult to do. But I hope by the end of the day that we all have some understanding of how to do that. Just real quickly, we'll have breaks at 10:30 to 10:45, and we all know the break routine. And then again at 3:30, lunches from 1 to 2. And we're such a small group, I figured we can either eat together, or if you need a break and some time alone, you can certainly find a place to eat as well. So we'll cross that bridge maybe when we come to it. By that time, you may need a break from it. So ecopsychology really then is really looking at how we begin to solve a lot of our global issues. And I know this feels daunting. It has felt daunting for me, sometimes even overwhelming, what we do with all the environmental, ecological, social issues that we're facing today. But my work in ecopsychology actually gives me hope. If I look around to see what's happening in the world and how we're addressing some of these problems, sometimes there's a sense of hopelessness or even despair around what we're going to do with the global situation. And I have found for myself that ecopsychology provides me hope because it gives me some tools to work with. So to start with, I'd like for you to turn to your neighbor, or in this group there's only 3 of you, and just let them know who you are and maybe a brief explanation of why you chose to come to this campus, so that we can kind of get to know each other a little bit, because as we move through the day, we're going to get to know each other pretty well as we start to open our ecosystems a little bit. So if you will, just share with each other, or if you want to, if you pick a microphone up, you can share it with the group. That's fine too. And I'll put another microphone at this table. So if you're joining us, maybe join one of these front 2 tables. So maybe share with each other why you're here, what your name is, where you're from. good. So a little bit of an icebreaker there, because we're going to be working with each other fairly closely today, so it's good to know your neighbor a little bit. So thank you for that. Just a little bit about ecopsychology to give you some groundwork. And the way that I'm going to structure the day today is I'll talk a little bit because we have to lay some foundation, because for the most part it seems to be very, very new for everyone. And then we'll do some experiential work with it so that you actually get some hands-on work with working with ecopsychology. So ecopsychology as a term was coined by Theodore Roszak in the early 70s, but it really goes back earlier than that to Rachel Carson. Those of you who are familiar with Dr. Carson's work, The Sea Around Us, and of course her groundbreaking book, Silent Spring, which really kicked off so much of the environmental movement, certainly in the United States, around pesticides. But the way Roszak used this term was more in a social context. He was trying to understand what was going on sociologically, what was going on environmentally in the 70s, and what was going on in communities. So he pulled this term together as far as why are people acting the way they're acting. And so the term came out of ecopsychology, and I'll break that down for you a little bit in a minute. There's several approaches, or quite a few approaches to ecopsychology. People use it anywhere from going out into nature for a vision quest or for outdoor education type of work. Some people use it more esoterically, transcendent approach to ecopsychology. So we all have a little bit of approach, especially in the United States. It's also very popular to call it ecotherapy. And so that's sort of a trend that's happening in the United States right now as well. Obviously what we're doing today is not ecotherapy, it's purely pedagogical. But it's interesting to look at it from that context. My approach to ecopsychology is through a depth psychological perspective. And I combine that with principles from ecology, biology, and ideas and research from evolutionary studies, neurosciences, which we'll bring in a little bit today, and the humanities that help us understand how metaphors and images can either hold a framework or a story or a narrative in place, or stimulate the creation of change in destructive attitudes, behaviors that are based on these narratives. So depth psychology really is any psychology that recognizes there are invisible or unknown patterns at work in the unconscious parts of our psychology. Basically, there are things that we don't know about ourselves. And for the most part, we operate from this place. We design our world from this place. We create businesses from this place. We create policies from sometimes a very unconscious position. So when we ask, as has been going on at this Congress all week, why are we still doing some of the things that we're doing? Why are we still behaving in the ways that we're behaving? Why hasn't policy changed? Why has not conservation maybe matured, is the word I would use? It's because our narratives have not changed. Our narratives haven't matured. If the story doesn't change, the story doesn't mature, the individual doesn't. So we'll get more into that as the day goes on. Well, I've worked with this slide I don't know how many times today, and it still got cut off a little bit, so I apologize for that, but it's not essential that you write down everything, because a lot of it will be repeated during the day today, so don't feel like you have to take notes on everything. But I wanted to break down the word for you as to how we get ecopsychology. Ecology, as you know, addresses the full scale of life, from microscopic bacteria to processes that span the entire planet. Ecology, I love the word, it comes from the Greek oikos, meaning home or dwelling, and of course logos, how we think about something, how we language something, how we reason through or present something. So it's the study of. So ecology would be then the study of home, the study of our home. So it's how we live. Psychology, again from the Greek, psyche, which I'll use interchangeably today a little bit, psyche, the study of our mental functioning or behavior. So why we think the way we do, why we act the way we do, why we say things in the most inopportune time and wish that there had been a clamp around our mouth at that particular moment. Something is coming through, our psychology that is asking for our attention, but it can also come out at the most embarrassing time. So psychology would be then how we relate or not. So how we live and how we relate is really what we're looking at ecopsychology. Psychology also, or psyche, has also been exchanged with the word soul. If we think about, is there a psyche to the world, the soul of the world? Sometimes you hear that a lot in ecopsychology, and I will use that maybe a little bit today, but I just wanted to lay out the caveat of how I use the word soul, that it refers to the deepening of events into experiences. For example, you may have an experience at this Congress, and you go home and people say, hey, what happened this week? And you say, I can't wait to tell you about this experience I had. Well, you had an event that meant something to you. So in trying to understand that, you create a story around it. Or maybe there's an image that goes with it, something that you saw while you were here that deepened that experience for you. Maybe you have a dream. Something comes to you in your dream state, an image in your dream, or a situation in your dream. I woke up at 1 this morning. I took a long hike yesterday. I think I walked across this island yesterday, I'm sure. Anyway, I felt like I did at the end of the day. And I had images from things that I saw coming into my dream state. And which was very interesting because I was trying to process all the things that I took in yesterday. I was sort of overloaded with stimulus. So we open our imaginations to more possibilities when I talk about the world's soul or soul making for us as an experience. It opens us to become more curious about something. Just to imagine a different way is sometimes very difficult because we tend, I think conservationists especially, tend to think in data and in pure sciences. And so today will be quite a different experience of that. We're going to think in images and metaphor and to sort of open our imagination and our curiosity about what we do with some of our global problems. So ecopsychology, I think, really implores us, urges us to ask, what is our manner of living? What is our manner of living in this ecosystem, this body? Lori, what is my manner of living in my Lori? What is your manner of living in your Wendy or in your Monica? What is our manner of living in our community? And what is our manner of living on the planet? How are we relational with ourselves, with others, and with the natural world? If I needed to define ecopsychology, and certainly we've done this as a field, part of our work with Veritas Graduate Institute is to define the field of ecopsychology, because it's sort of been a word kind of flying in the breeze a lot. No one really knows what it means or how to ground it. So we've tried to, we have come up with a definition for it. This is what we use at the Institute. And so ecopsychology is really predicated on the belief that humanity is a part of nature. That may sound simplistic, but as we work through the day, I think you'll realize that that really is kind of a complex and complicated way of thinking. Because for the most part, we don't think that we are a part of nature. We mouth it, we have the language of it, but how do we really understand that and experience it? So we bridge the sciences and the humanities, which you'll get a lot of today, in order to create or stimulate our imagination, our insight, how we reason through something, that we critically think through something, to foster a more mature, empathic way of approaching things. And I think that's one of the most important things about ecopsychology, that it does try to evolve us, it tries to mature us. And of course, bring an ethical awareness to the situation, into our own lives. So we utilize, as I said earlier, ecological, biological, and psychological principles that are essential to sustainability. One of the things I've missed in this Congress is a psychological dimension to sustainability. And one of the reasons why I started the Institute doing a survey in the United States of all the sustainability programs of which they keep popping up on a daily basis, whether it's in business, international affairs, economics. Most of it revolves around economics and business. There's not one psychology class in any of those courses. And I don't personally understand how we can have sustainability without understanding the psychological dimension, because that allows us to understand sort of what's going on behind the scenes, under the surface, if you will. And I'll get to that again in a minute. So we too are an ecosystem participating in a wider complexity of life. Yet, as we've heard all week, we're the only species causing the devastation of other living systems, including the planet we live on. This particular art by Kate McDowell I actually love, because it very well situates us in the image of an ecosystem, that we too are an ecosystem, that we too are a part of nature, and nature is who we are, part of us. So ecopsychologists ask many times, why are we ecocidal? Why do we destroy the planet that we live on and need, rely on for our survival? We can also further that question to ask, why are we eco-suicidal? Why are we destroying ourselves? And instead of destroying the planet we live on. It's reciprocal, it goes both ways. What we do to ourselves, we do to the planet. What we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. You guys all know this. But I want to unpack that today. So my answer to these questions I'm going to suggest today is that because we human beings live our lives by and create our world through our old mythologies and narratives that bind us to particular behaviors, particular way of seeing things, and certainly to the practices that we create, whether they're environmental practices, social practices, economic practices. And they foster and promote a disconnection. And this is where I'm going.